Every veteran has a story of sacrifice, courage, humor, and heartache. Each week, Veteran Story Hour captures these remarkable stories firsthand in the voices of those who've served. Recorded live from the weekly Friday brunch in the Salute of Virginia studio in Waynesboro, this is more than a podcast. It's a living history, preserving the legacy of America's heroes. You're listening to Veteran Story Hour, Voices of Valor, presented by Salute of Virginia. Let's begin. In 1975, a 19-year-old girl walked into a classroom at VMI, an all-male military institution, to study the history of warfare. The instructor looked at her and said, "What are you doing here?" She said, "I like this stuff." And for the rest of that summer, one of her instructors pretended she didn't exist, wouldn't call on her, wouldn't look at her. She wasn't supposed to be there, and he made sure she knew it. So she studied harder than anyone in that room, got the highest grade in the class, and when he handed back the exams, he looked at her and said 5 words she'd carry for the rest of her career: "The infantry will take you." What followed was a 28-year career in the United States Army Intelligence, from jump school at Fort Benning, to briefing the Secretary of Defense in Bosnia, to running NATO intelligence in Afghanistan. Then, after she took off the uniform, the work she did as a civilian analyzing thousands of vehicle attacks led to a single PowerPoint slide that changed the entire fleet the Army sent to war and saved lives that are still being lived today. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the story of Colonel Melissa Patrick.
My name is Melissa Patrick. I served in the United States Army from 1978 to 2006, so almost 28 years that I was in the service. And my field in the Army was military intelligence.
How in the world do you get started in military intelligence in the mid to late 1970s?
So, well, let me go back to how do you get into the Army as a woman?
In 1978.
In 1970, yeah.
Yeah. So, and actually, my story started in 1975, actually. I was in college. I was a student at Mary Baldwin College, so over in Stanton. My dad was on the faculty there. He was a professor. And so as a rising sophomore at Mary Baldwin, I wanted to go to summer school and get extra credits and so forth. And so I went to VMI, Virginia Military Institute, for summer school. Now, at that time, if you recall, VMI was all male, but their summer school was open to women. And so I signed up for the courses that I liked, which included history of warfare. And the professor in that class, who was a retired Marine who'd served in the Pacific Theater during World War II and still had the psychological scars from having done that, had never taught a woman before. And so he sees me in his classroom and he says, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I like this stuff. I really like military history." And he said, "You need to be an ROTC." And I said, "I can't be an ROTC because it's not open to women." And he said, "You're so wrong. They just opened it to women maybe a year or two before." And so he took me to Kilburn Hall at VMI, which is where all the ROTC departments were located. And I interviewed with each one of the services about what women did in their services. So bear in mind, this is 1975.
Yeah, so not a whole lot of anything outside of medical stuff.
Well, sort of. And it varied from service to service. So the Marines, were women did admin. That was it. The Navy, no women on ships at that time. And to me, at that time, the heart and soul of the Navy was ships. You can't go to sea. What's the point in being in the Navy?
Right.
Air Force, the same thing. Women didn't fly. In the heart and soul of the Navy, of the Air Force, is the aircraft and the pilots and stuff. So what's the point? The Army had the most opportunities for women beyond the medical service and medical fields. And so I signed up for Army ROTC right then and there. I took the first year of Army ROTC that summer at VMI. Very interesting experience with the ROTC
sure
cadre, who, again, had never experienced having a woman in their classes. So some of the instructors, kind of cleaned up their language because I was there. I had one instructor who was teaching the infantry basic stuff. He was an infantryman who, the way he dealt with it was he acknowledged my presence in the classroom when he called the roll. And then after that, I did not exist in that classroom. He didn't call on me. He didn't look at me. He didn't clean up his language. He told all the same jokes, et cetera, et cetera.
You were just physically there.
And so, which motivated me a lot, the fact that he ignored me like that. Because I felt like I'm going to make him notice me. And so I studied my little butt off, and I got the highest grade in the class for the final in that particular block of instruction. And one of my great achievements was when he handed the exams back out with the grades, and he did it in, lowest to highest. So he finally came around to me. I'd gotten 100 on it or whatever. And in that moment, he acknowledged me because he said, "The infantry will take you." And that was it. And that
everything you'd been working for.
And that was everything I'd been working for.
Yeah.
That's right. But anyway, at the end of the summer, of course, VMI is all male. And so the ROTC department said to me, "Nice knowing you, but don't come back."
Yeah.
Because I couldn't sit in their classroom.
Right.
And so I'm still a student at Mary Baldwin. And so I had to travel to get ROTC. I went to Blue Ridge Community College for a year and then 2 years at James Madison as a cross-enrolled cadet. And then I was commissioned when I graduated in 1978. So that's how I started in the Army.
Because Blue Ridge and JMU had ROTC programs
Correct.
that they would accept you in.
Yes.
So the VMI restriction was mainly just because VMI as an institution at that time
Was all male.
still wasn't taking female cadets.
That's correct.
Okay.
Right. And bear in mind that VMI continued to be all male for another 20 to 25 years.
Sure.
After I had started there in ROTC.
When you were dealing with the instructors and you're going through the program, you noted that they treated you differently, as in like softer, cleaner, whatever. Did you want them to? Or did you have a desire that you wanted to be treated as an equal? I
did not want them to.
Yeah.
I don't know that I necessarily sat around thinking about it.
Sure.
Yeah. I was 18, 19 years old at that time. But yeah, I wanted to be treated as an equal and accepted, And so it was very clear to me that I had to work hard for that. I had to earn that respect, really.
Oh yeah, because you're starting. You're not just starting flat, right? You're not starting at the ground level like everybody else. You're starting in the basement. And you got to work your way up to the lobby to be with everybody else, kind of just to be even on an equal footing. So you're going to have to work twice as hard. The thought that I would have is, as you are starting to do this, it's not lost on you that you're the first one. It would be very obvious, right? And you know it and you feel it. And then they're literally telling you. I've never dealt with a female in my classroom before. Did you have a weight on you when you're thinking about it, even as an 18 or 19-year-old, that it is, I can't screw this up, not only for me personally, but for like other females to come in after me? Was there even that level of depth at that point?
I think I may have been too immature.
That's fair. That's a
have
totally fair answer.
thought about that. Of course, it was a long time ago, so I don't recall that as being pressure on me. It was more that I wanted to earn that respect for myself. And that has been a fairly powerful motivating factor for a lot of my military career, not just, that ROTC experience, but that carried on into my Army career. It diminished somewhat as I gained rank and so forth. There was less pressure that way, but certainly in the early years, that was a very powerful motivator. So that drove me in terms of physical fitness.
Sure.
I had to compete with the guys.
Oh, yeah.
So, passing the PT test on the women's scale wasn't really what the goal was. It was at least maxing the women's test and scoring respectably on the men's scale, back when we had, a men's and a woman's scoring scale. And one of the things, this is kind of funny, but I went into the Army early enough that the women's PT test did not have a running event when I first went in the Army. The men's running event was 1 mile, not the 2 mile that most of us are familiar with.
Oh, yeah.
But the women's running event was running in place. You counted your steps.
What?
Yes.
What possibly could have been the rationale?
I have no earthly idea. And I'll tell you, you're standing there in the middle of the track, in the field, in the middle of the track, you and the other women officers, other second lieutenants at the basic course, and the guys are running on the track around you, and you are counting your steps. You count to 100 and then face in another direction and count to 100 again and so forth. Really humiliating. And we all hated it. The first 10K that I ever ran was really kind of as a result of that. I had come physically fit anyway when I went to the basic course. But, I was running on the hills in Stanton, which is very helpful. And
yeah, it's definitely not the same as running on a flat ground.
In place?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'd never run a 10K. At least I'd never knowingly run that distance,
Right.
In a measured distance or anything. And there was a 10K there at Fort Huachuca. And so a friend of mine, she'd signed up for it. And I thought, oh, what the heck, I'll do it too, And so we went out and ran this 10K. But, some of that was also being driven by, I have to demonstrate I can do more than count 600 steps in place. And so that was back in the day. But anyway, that drive to prove yourself not only extended into that sort of thing, but also I volunteered to go to jump school.
Okay.
And I'm a master parachutist now. But when I was in ROTC summer camp, there was a female cadet in our platoon, and she had gone to jump school and was wearing wings. None of the rest of us, of course, had. And I saw that everybody treated her differently, and they treated her with respect. And I thought, I want to wear my respect on my chest, too.
Yeah.
And so when I was at the officer basic course, I volunteered to go to Benning, for jump school, which I did do, and took 2 passes to make it through.
Hey,
and so
through
forth.
is through.
That's right. And, and when I went to jump school at that time, we started out with 15 women in the class, and at the end of the first week, there were only 3 of us left. They were washing out women right and left and so forth. Lots of men as well. And so I had my jump wings, and then after I had been assigned to Korea and I needed an an assignment to go to coming back from Korea, I volunteered to go to Bragg. And so I was on jump status. And, I'm afraid of heights. And
No, hold on. You buried that lead. I love that, though. I love that it is just, no, it is wear the respect on my chest. I saw the difference. I don't care.
I'm going to get it.
I don't care if I'm afraid of heights. I just want the respect.
Yeah.
No matter what it takes to get it.
Right. And so when I was at Bragg, I was assigned to the operations section for the 18th Airborne Corps G2, the intel staff there. And they scheduled all the jumps for the G2 staff. And so here I am as a lieutenant, and all these senior NCOs and more senior. I was actually slotted in a lieutenant colonel's slot as a first lieutenant. Anyway, I signed up for every jump I could sign up for. Then I'd pray for high winds, that we wouldn't have to go and so forth.
It's like
but
I signed
anyway,
up for them all and didn't have to do any of them.
But I did accumulate a lot of jumps that way. And so my fears of jumping, they never went away. I don't think they do for no matter how experienced you are, but they certainly diminished a lot. I didn't spend days praying for bad weather.
Just hours at that point.
Yeah,
exactly.
And I wanted to be a company commander, and the battalion commander who would have taken me as a company commander, he had a policy that you had to go to jump master school. Company commanders had to be jump masters. So I went to jump master school, and I had to go twice because they have less than 50% pass rate at the 82nd Airborne Jump Master School. So anyway, I became a jump master, and again, I was chasing jumps, and in 3 years, I had the 65 jumps I needed for master wings. But that was part of being driven to prove myself, to earn that respect and so forth. And when you get not only the jump wings, but the star and the wreath and so forth, I mean, that really says something. And
well, yeah, there's a difference between I have wings because I did my 5 jumps versus I have this wreath that says I did 60 jumps.
Yeah, 65. Don't lose track of.
No, you got 60. You got to do 5 to get wings.
Oh yeah, and 60 more. Yeah, right. Okay.
How dare you, Zach?
Yeah. Everyone counts.
So as you're now are you still is that trailblazing for master jump? Like how many females were at that point? Did you?
I don't know for sure. The Army doesn't keep track of that kind of thing, but I'm sure I was among the first 10 women to earn master wings. I think I was probably the 6th or around there.
Because that's
don't know
the
for sure.
Mid 80s.
I got those master wings
somewhere in the mid 80s.
Let's see. I'd say around 83, 84.
Yeah, easily in the first 10.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The amount of resistance that you had to have met. There's no way everybody was a stud about this and was super accepting and super like gung-ho and supportive of you. How do you continue to keep your head down with such headwinds?
Well, I think some of it is that, you can allow it to get you down, or you can use it to drive you.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. I really wanted to be in the Army. I really wanted to be a soldier. When you start in the Army, you start on a career, you don't have a really good grasp of what a career is like 15, 20 years out there and so forth. But I did not visualize myself as being in the Army for a couple of years and getting out. I never visualized myself as having something beyond the Army.
Why? Why are you so driven? Why is this such a strong magnetic gravitational force to this thing?
And I don't have a good answer for that. It is something that I was fascinated by since I was a kid, and I can't tell you why I was fascinated by it. But when I was a kid, I would go to the library, and there would be these coffee table books.
Yeah.
There was one for West Point and there was one for Annapolis with all these pictures of cadets in uniform and all that sort of thing. And I would look at those books, every picture, and I could imagine myself in those uniforms and marching in the parades and all that sort of thing. And I didn't notice there were no women in those books.
Sure.
Stanton at that time had the Stanton Military Academy.
Sure.
So we had young men in uniform in town, and they would march down the main street in parades and things like that. So I was fascinated by that. My father read a lot of military history. So we had a lot of military history books around the house. So I'd be reading biographies of George Patton and Douglas MacArthur and so forth. And my dad would take us to the battlefields in Virginia, the Civil War battlefields. And I think my siblings were probably bored by it all, but I was fascinated by it. And so I don't know where that comes from. I just know that very early in my life that I was very fascinated by it.
Well, clearly you were just a badass general in previous lives, right? And you just, because it's in your DNA, man. Like, it's obvious that it's, because, hey, listen, I come from a family, my stories aren't military based, but I come from a family of artists and musicians. And out I popped out an essential giant for my family who was obsessed with sports and violence. It didn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody understands why, but literally my parents are like, when you were like little, we knew like football was going to be what you were going to do. My dad tried football for one day and broke his pinky and was like, I will never do this again. This is the worst sport on the planet. And for me, it's like I could not get enough violence, whether it was violence against me or violence against another in a sporting avenue. I was hooked. Before I even got to try it, I was hooked and I was sold.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but that's where for me it sounds so akin to that, which is like, no, it's in the DNA. I don't know what to tell you. There's something wrong with me, right? There's something wrong with me, and I find that connection. So I really, really like that.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. So you get your master wings. You're continuing to make this progress, and what happens next?
Well, I continue on with my career. A lot of people at Fort Bragg homestead there. I was never assigned in the 82nd Airborne. The 82nd Airborne Division did not want women and tried to keep them out. So I was with the 18th Airborne Corps and then one of the Corps units, the Military Intelligence Brigade. And at the end of 3 years, I got reassigned. I left Bragg. So unlike an awful lot of men who are at Bragg jumping, and they can be at Bragg for 7, 8 years, however long, or forever, right? But I wasn't going to stay at Bragg whether I wanted to or not. And the Army has been very good to me. And so I was selected to go to graduate school and then go teach at West Point. And what was I teaching? I was teaching military history, of course.
Naturally.
So the Army sent me to Duke University for my master's degree. And then after those 2 years of study, I was at West Point for 3 years, teaching history of the military art, what at West Point the cadets refer to as art. And and Revolutionary Warfare.
And what years were you teaching at West Point?
I was teaching there from, I think, 87 to 90.
Got to call that out. There's going to be listeners that, do you know anybody here? Did you teach anybody? Have you crossed paths with any of your students post-career of being a teacher at West Point?
I did later in my career.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not since I've retired that I can recall, but yeah.
Teachers are special, man.
Yeah,
Like
they are.
They're a special group of humans. The ability of those connections that you can make with them, even if it's for brief, even if you're only there for 3 years, 2 years, there's a couple of those relationships that you can hit on that just last. I mean, we're only in high school, right, for 4 years if we do it right. And and I may have only had an instructor for a single year, but I still think about them today, like those special instructors. So that's why I divert for a moment for the teaching aspect, because it's a huge deal.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I learned I had a passion for teaching.
Yeah.
I love teaching. And so that was really a very special, neat experience to be able to go do that. And we'd take the cadets on staff rides around West Point in the Revolution and so forth. And then we'd go to Gettysburg and, walk the ground and all that sort of thing. So that was...
That'd be cool. As a student, that would be cool.
Virginia is this area is such a unique place, not just for history, but then military history.
Right.
I think it would be hard to be it can't be rivaled by any other location, I would imagine, especially U.S.-based history.
Yes. Yeah. So, and being in the Shenandoah Valley, you have Jackson's Valley Campaign and so forth, which, is studied worldwide in terms of tactics and strategy and so forth. So I was very fortunate to be able to do that.
So while you're there, so how does it work? So you're there at West Point. Obviously, you enjoyed it. It was right in your niche, right in an area that you obviously were passionate about it. Why do you leave? What gets you pulled away? How does that whole situation go down?
Well, I got reassigned. You don't get to stay there.
It just is whatever the next assignment comes up.
It is an
just
assignment.
Another duty station.
Yeah. So you do your 3 years teaching, and there is a career track where you can stay there permanently, but I wasn't in that career track, and I didn't know what the future held for me in military intelligence, but I was ready to get back to the field. My career track within the intelligence field was always tactical intelligence. I didn't specialize in things like signals intelligence or human intelligence or what have you. And I managed those and integrated those various different jobs and so forth. But my career path was that I was an intelligence officer in support of a combat commander. I was muddy boots tactical intelligence my whole career. And so I was ready to get back to the field and go out there and be in support of some commander who needed intelligence support. So I had a job as my very first job in the Army, actually, after I got out of the intelligence school, was as a battalion S2, so the battalion intel officer. That was for an air defense battalion. And air defense had only just opened up to women at the time. So I was one of 2 female officers in that battalion. So that was very early in my career. But later on, I became a Division G2, so the senior intelligence officer for a division commander. And that division, we deployed into Bosnia. We were the first U.S. force to go into Bosnia at the end of the Bosnian War to implement the Dayton Accords, the peace agreement there. And so, that was a big intelligence job.
Oh, yeah.
Going in and doing that. And ultimately, my career culminated with being the senior intelligence officer, the chief of intelligence for the NATO forces in Afghanistan for ISAF.
So what goes into that? Let's use the this last one, that last example that you just gave, like, what does that entail? When you use these phrases, we have a lot of folks that are civilians, totally non-military background that will listen to these episodes. Give us a snapshot of, like, what does that entail, your role while you're in Afghanistan?
So what you're doing is you're coordinating intelligence collection across various different disciplines. I mentioned signals intelligence, human intelligence, imagery intelligence. In the NATO environment, by and large, it's human intelligence because there's not a whole lot of technical collection capability among the other NATO nations. But if I had been doing it in a U.S. environment, then there would have been also all this additional technical collection ability. So you're coordinating the collection requirements and then the analysis of what comes in, and then you develop an intelligence read that you are providing to the commander so he can make operational decisions based on what you're saying about the threat and what the threat is doing, and you project what you think they're going to do, which is always hard.
Sure.
Because there are no real crystal balls, for people in intelligence. I tell young people who they all want to go into intelligence because it's so, romantic and so forth. And I say, you better have a thick skin if you want to go into the intelligence field, because you will be wrong as often as you're right. And commanders can be very unforgiving about that.
Yeah, I mean, because your job is basically to take all of the information that's given to all the analysts collect, and then compile an action plan based off of that, right?
Well, the action plan is the commander's plan.
Sure.
Not mine.
Right.
But what I tell the commander is going to shape that action plan.
Yeah, you're
absolutely.
You're just packaging that data, so an action plan, and then it sounds like you are making some forecast projections.
Yes,
which is
absolutely.
Like, hey, this could be right. It's
right. So, for example, going back to when I was a Division G2, which G2 just means you're the chief intel officer on the general staff, is what that means. So, 1st Armored Division, we're getting ready to go into Bosnia to implement the Dayton Accords. One of the key questions is, will we go in unopposed or will we be fired upon? There were 3 different warring factions in Bosnia fighting each other, and they weren't necessarily happy about this peace accord that had been forced on them
Sure.
by
Shocking.
President Clinton, right?
Shocking.
So are they going to allow us to come in? Is it going to be a permissive environment, a semi-permissive environment, or a non-permissive environment, right?
Right.
And so the division commander's looking at me to tell him that. And I don't know. So you have to, you come up with your best guess.
Right.
And
educated guess.
yeah. Based on a whole variety of different indicators and intel reporting and so forth, and you put it together, and then you tell him, I think this is what it's going to be. And as it turned out, it was largely a permissive environment. There were a few little glitches, but but that was because, after 4 years of war, the people who had been fighting were so tired that they actually were ready to stop fighting. And so that enabled us to go in. And the United States, doing its usual thing, went in with overwhelming force.
No,
so that
we would never.
so that, we didn't face opposition. But we didn't know. And
Sure.
our preparation was, it was intense, and there was an awful lot of pressure. One of the things that commanders were really concerned about was that in that war, the different warring factions would establish confrontation lines that stayed fairly stable, and they would put in minefields. And there were extensive minefields all throughout Bosnia. And particularly the engineer brigade commander wanted good intel on where those mines were located.
Oh, yeah, naturally.
And that just wasn't there,
Sure.
you know?
Because why would you know?
Right.
Right.
And
Why would they tell you where they are?
And why, and why, they
Right.
hid them for a reason.
And but, you know, at one point, he was really in my face, except he was a lot taller than me. But anyway, you know, yelling at me because he wanted to hand off to his engineers where those minefields were so they could get started on clearing them and all that sort of thing. And other than just kind of giving, well, they're in this area, but I can't tell you exactly where the mines are located. I can tell you they're in this area, they're in that area, and so forth.
Just drop a few bowling balls from a Chinook. You'll find them.
So that's an example of some of the intel requirements that we had at that particular time. And, you know, it was pretty intense because people could have died, you know. And in fact, we did have some soldiers that strayed into minefields that they, in that particular case, had been warned about where they were located and they ignored what they'd been told. But at the time it happened and they were injured, thankfully they survived. But at the time it happened, of course, you know, all the commanders are all up in arms, you know, because they don't want other units to encounter mines and so forth. So
being in intel, did you have like cross-agency sharing of information, or were you all isolated to just what you were doing within your general unit or battalion or group? Did you get to share with all the big names we can think of when it comes to intelligence for the United States?
All the initials.
yes,
All of the initials.
yeah. So in that particular case, when the 1st Armored Division went into Bosnia, it was at the time the only war in town, if you will.
Sure.
And not only was, of course, my division commander very concerned about U.S. troops not being injured or killed in this operation, the President of the United States was really concerned about it as well. And so we took liaison teams out of all of the alphabet soup agencies. And so, you know, I could reach out directly back to various agencies in the D.C. area and so forth. And that was a new experience for me. It was also kind of interesting because as we were doing our prep, all of a sudden we discovered that there were some threats that we didn't know about, that, you know, those agencies had known about, but it was tightly compartmented, et cetera, et cetera. And so we weren't aware of certain things. And then as we are about to set boots on the ground and so forth, then they share the intel with us.
You get
know,
to, by the way, guys,
heads up.
you might not want to go over there.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why I asked.
Yeah.
Just because looking back, right, it's being able to look at it from a historical standpoint, is that we know depending on which one of those alphabet soup organizations and agencies are working, where they're working, there's a lot of balls in the air as far as like who we might be providing weapons or intel to, which rebellious force is going to, the enemy of our enemy is our friend, but they're your enemy from what you all are doing. But actually, we've been giving these guys a lot of money and a lot of ammunition to be able to help fight, but now we're here now. I couldn't imagine just all of the variables, especially going into Afghanistan.
Right. Well, in the case of Bosnia, there were really two things we had to be mindful of. One is that the implementation force that was put together to implement that peace was a multinational force, and it included the Russians. This is 1995. Mm-hmm. So the Soviet Union had, just dissolved just a few years before. And now you have a Russian brigade that is in the area of operations of a U.S. division and is part of the U.S. division's task force. And my role is as an intelligence officer. And I actually had the Secretary of Defense, William Perry, put his finger in my chest and say, you will not hold anything back if it's force protection related. Now, talk about flipping everything on its head.
Yeah.
Totally new world with that. So that was an interesting situation. The other thing that we were concerned about was that the Dayton Accords required all foreign fighters to leave, and most of them did. However, there were a lot of mujahideen who'd gone into Bosnia because when the Soviet Union pulled out of Afghanistan, the mujahideen basically had lost their reason for being in Afghanistan.
Right.
So the next jihad for them was actually in Bosnia. And so there were a variety of different Islamic fighters, Algerians, Egyptians, et cetera, Arabs and so forth, that were in Bosnia. And they were supposed to have left. Some of them did. But there were others that didn't. And they kind of just went off into a little spot there, and hid themselves. But they were potentially a force protection threat for us.
Sure.
Going in. And so that was the other thing, really, that, I was concerned about. Well, my commander was concerned about it, so I was concerned
Therefore,
about it.
you were concerned
That's
about
right.
it.
Yeah.
So the tail end of your career ends in Afghanistan?
Yes.
And how do you make the decision 2 decades plus? How do you make the decision to retire? How does that come about?
So I was, by then I was a colonel. Mandatory retirement for a colonel is for 30 years. The Army tells you.
They let you
Yeah.
know that you're ready
Right.
to retire.
Right. But so I'm assuming I'm going to be in for 30 years, but I was stationed in Germany, had been in Germany for a good many years. My deployment to Afghanistan, for example, was out of Germany. And I realized when I was talking to my mother, she would say to me, in that sweet motherly way, now tell me again when you're going to retire, when you're planning to retire. And at first I thought she was just curious, and then the second time she asked me, I thought, well, she forgot what I told her, and the third time she asked me, I went, that's the message.
Right.
And so I retired for my parents, and actually I put in for retirement, and the Army turned me down and sent me to Afghanistan. And then
Oh, that so tracks for the Army. Winning.
and so when I came back from Afghanistan, I put my retirement papers in again and got out. Yeah.
So, story, an amazing length of career, right? We've been fortunate enough now to interview at least one other person that
Rob.
Rob did it an insane number of years as well.
Yeah, he did 30 in the Navy.
That is more rare in my experience of talking to people that put in that number of years. And did you have any idea what you wanted to do once you were going to step into civilian life? How was that transitionary period where, the Army was your life? It was your life, everything you wanted to do from being a little girl to then living it, eating it, breathing it for so long.
Right. Right. And it is really very disorienting to all of a sudden find yourself as a civilian. You've lived a life of being in service and the discipline and the structure and all that sort of thing. And when you've achieved a fair amount of rank, to find civilians don't have ranks. How annoying!
They don't.
It's very annoying.
They also don't have badges that tell you their name.
Well, exactly. So even a private in the Army has a niche. In the military structure, everybody has a niche.
Sure.
They have a place and so forth. And then you get out and you're in this very disorderly civilian world. People don't show up on time. People don't complete projects on time.
They show up to school in tiger costumes.
Yeah, right. They dress weird, and so forth. And so I miss being in the Army, 20 years after getting out. I still miss it because it just was so different to be a civilian. And I didn't know what I wanted to do as a civilian. The first thing that I did do was I became a contractor for the Army. And I worked over at the National Ground Intelligence Center over in Charlottesville for about 5 years. And I do want to mention this because it was such important work that we did. I was the contract project lead on a project that was responsible for collecting all the data on every attack against a U.S. armored vehicle that happened in Iraq or Afghanistan, and databasing that and analyzing it. And what we were doing that for was to identify the impacts of different types of weapons against types of armor packages and providing that information to the developers of armored vehicles. So, for example, the driver's seat in an Abrams tank was changed as a result of the injuries that drivers were getting from underbelly attacks. And we had the data on that. The most important thing that we did was, or I should say the most significant thing that we accomplished was we compared the impact of underbelly attacks against flat-bottom vehicles like Humvees to V-shaped vehicles, the MRAPs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we were able to show, this is one of the proudest things that I ever did, actually, was we were able to take all that data, thousands of attacks, reduce it to a single PowerPoint briefing slide that was presented to the Chief of Staff of the Army that compared the mortality rates in those different type of vehicles. And the result of that was the Chief of Staff of the Army directed the massive purchase of the MRAPs and their fielding in Iraq and Afghanistan and pulling the Humvees out. I don't know how many lives we saved. One of the things that I still save on my hard drive is a news article from the Stanton News Leader about an attack on a vehicle. I don't even remember whether it was Iraq or Afghanistan, but it was a 300-pound bomb that went off underneath this vehicle. It was an MRAP. And there was a young man from Stanton that was in that vehicle. And that crew survived that, And so it's interesting to me. It's kind of ironic that really probably the most significant thing that I've done in my military career was not in uniform. But it, no doubt in my mind, made a huge difference on saving the lives of military personnel, being able to provide that data so the chief would make, because that was a multi-billion-dollar buy.
Yeah.
And the Army came into great criticism from people in Congress, for spending that money. But we had the data on what difference it made.
How poetic is it that, sorry, go ahead, Zach.
Well, I was going to say that's what happens when you have no understanding of what actually happens in something, and then you can prove why it needs to change.
Yeah.
And how poetic is it that the same hills you were running 30 years before, the work that you do saves the life of a young man that wasn't even a twinkle in the eyes of his parents at the time,
right,
from the same hills,
Yeah.
30 years later
Yeah.
who doesn't come home in a casket
Yeah.
because of that work.
Yeah.
Like, that's awesome.
Pretty substantial.
It's significant. There's definitely going to be a listener who does listen to every episode and then gives me his feedback after every episode who was in Afghanistan for the National Guard. Do you know how they were protecting themselves when they had to be able to drive all the munitions across the desert? They put sandbags
Right.
on the floor of their Humvees,
Yes.
the same Humvees that they drove on the highways in North Carolina. That was the only protection that they had.
Right.
And he told the story on the episode with me where it was his parents were, all the parents were calling congressmen, calling the military, being like, how is it possible that our sons are driving the same vehicles on our highways here and they're over there
Right.
with IEDs and everything else that we know that's going on? How is this possible?
Yeah.
I remember him talking about, I mean, it was significant.
Right.
Of just the risk that they were taking. And it just was, this is all we got.
Right.
And for that major change, that's awesome. That's a fantastic story. So you continue to stay engaged within the military community. Obviously, you do the 5 years working out of Charlottesville, and you now are here in this building in Salute, working with another 3-letter organization now, with the VFW. Tell us about kind of what gets you involved with the VFW.
Yeah, well, I joined the Veterans of Foreign Wars while I was on active duty. I may have been in Afghanistan at the time or something like that. Stanton has 2 VFW posts, and my mother was friends with the commander of one of those VFW posts. And so he had asked her if she would ask me to join the VFW. So she got a hold of me and said, Oliver Tate, wants you to join his VFW post. And I said, yeah, sure, I will. Happy to do that. And at that point, my mother said, now, Stanton has 2 VFW posts. And what she was saying was Stanton has 2 because of history. One was historically the white post and one was historically the black post. And Oliver was the commander of the black post. And I knew what my mom was saying to me. I'm not sure how I even knew while I was gone in the Army that Stanton had 2, but I did. And so I said, Mom, yeah, I know Stanton has 2 VFW posts and I'm joining this one.
Sure.
And so I joined the smaller of the 2 VFW posts, did nothing with the VFW as long as I was in the Army. But when I retired and I came back to Stanton to look after my parents and so forth, I started going to VFW meetings. And that particular VFW post was mostly World War II guys, and they were older guys. By now it's 2006, 2007. The World War II generation is aging, and a lot of guys have died and so forth. And that post was struggling. But as I got to know the men in that post, all of them were people who had grown up during segregation. And even the Vietnam veterans in that post, the schools they went to were segregated. And they would go off and serve, and they'd come back to a segregated society. And I was just so amazed, I guess in awe, of the fact that they had served their country, a country that didn't really treat them as equals, that disenfranchised them and so forth, that they had served so proudly with such dignity and loved America. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. And so, I wanted to be involved with them and help preserve the post and so forth. And now that particular post has moved on, and it's I say it's the historically all black post, but it's everybody is a member, and so forth. But I became involved in VFW activities, the parades, taking care of veterans, Memorial Day ceremony, all that kind of stuff. And I think some of it is that I talked about how disorienting it is to leave the military and become a civilian, and this messy civilian life and so forth. And the VFW gives you that connection back to, your military roots and so forth. And so even though, we don't have any ranks, I never tell people what my rank in the Army was. They all find out anyway. But it's not because I'm going around telling them.
Because they all go get their own intel about you.
That's right. And so I just like having that connection to the military, whether it's we're out doing a parade or we're celebrating, the birthday of the Army or the Marine Corps birthday, or we may just be doing a community service project. My post likes to, every year we do the concessions for the kids fishing derby. It's a lot of fun. We cook, we're giving kids hot dogs and drinks and stuff, but we have a good time. We just get together. It's that camaraderie and so forth. And you have this whole variety of different military experiences and serving in different periods of time and so forth. But it's just really neat to connect with people on the basis of their military service. And so it's important to me. And so I've just, I didn't mean to become the district commander for the VFW. I've been the district commander now for, there are 12 VFW posts in this district, and I've been the district commander for almost 10 years. I haven't been able to get rid of that role yet. But, and tomorrow we'll be giving out awards to school children for their patriotic essays that they wrote, and that's really neat and so forth. So it's a really cool thing, and I enjoy being involved with the VFW very much. And because I'm the district commander, when I first took over as district commander many years ago, I was looking for some way to get many of our VFW posts in this area maybe a little more active and working with each other. And so we came up with the idea of a bicycle ride, and that's the Valley Veterans Ride for Heroes that I told you about a couple of months ago. And what that has grown into is this charity bicycle ride as a fundraiser where all of the funds go to Boulder Crest Foundation in Bluemont, Virginia. And they go to support combat veterans who are dealing with PTSD or struggling with suicidal thoughts and things like that. Boulder Crest Foundation is a place where they have a program where combat veterans can come in. It's a cohort of about 8 people at a time, 8 to 10, that go through this program that teaches them how to deal with the fact that their lives have been changed by their combat experiences, and they're not going to go back to who they were before they experienced those things. So how do you cope with that? How do you handle that? How do you deal with that? And that's what Boulder Crest does, is help people make that adjustment to the fact that they have experienced great trauma. They have been changed by that trauma. Now, how do you continue to live your life and be productive now that you've experienced that trauma? We have been doing this coming year in 2026. The bicycle ride is on September the 12th. It's our 10th year of doing it. It will be the day after the 25th anniversary of 9/11. So we will memorialize that as well. And so far, we have donated $295,000 to Boulder Crest over the 9 years that we've been doing this bicycle ride.
Not bad.
Not bad. And so we hope that this 10th year will really be, a big thing. It will probably be the last year that we do it. It takes a lot to put on this bicycle ride. The bicycle ride itself is not all that hard to put on. It's the fundraising that's so hard.
Oh, yeah.
And you do that for months and months, and you approach different businesses and corporations, and some are great, and some mean well, and they tell you they want to support, but then they ghost you, and so forth, and you struggle through. Last year, I thought, we'll never raise this money, and then at the end, we were able last year to donate $45,000. But, for a while, I thought, we're not having any riders registering, we're not bringing in money, and so forth. So anyway, I think we have probably brought this as far as we can bring it, or at least in my mind anyway, But that's our big project that we do in the district. And I'm very proud of what we've been able to do, because I know that there are a lot of combat veterans who have been able to go and get help through the auspices of Boulder Crest Foundation. And they're able to go at no cost to themselves because of the money that we provide.
That's incredible. When you think about this upcoming year, 10-year anniversary, 25-year anniversary for 9/11, do you have a target of how much money you would like to be able to go out on when it comes to how much money you raise? Yeah.
That was my target last year. We didn't make it, but we did. The 1 year where we brought in the most was $52,000. And so I don't see why, we shouldn't be able to raise $50,000 this year.
Well, and $50,000, when did you raise 52?
That was, I think, 3 years ago.
So based off of inflation, that's now $75,000 of today's money.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right.
So no, I with the 10-year anniversary coming up for this Valley Veterans Ride for Heroes program that you guys have been doing now, and the 25-year anniversary for 9/11, a huge goal of raising at least $50,000. And so if you're listening, or you know somebody that is interested in being able to participate or wants to be able to get in touch with Melissa and be able to talk about how they can be involved, and most importantly, how they can give money, the easiest place for everybody to reach out to is valleyveteransride@gmail.com. And you can learn more about the entire program at valleyvetsride4, and that's the number 4, heroes.com, valleyvetsride4heroes.com. And then they also have an active Facebook page that you can find them at Valley Veterans Ride for Heroes. And we'll have links to all this inside of the description for the episode as well. Make it easier on all the listeners. Melissa, thanks so much for being on and talking us through your history, the amazing things that you're doing. Would you be willing to be back on as we get closer for the big ride, and we can talk about it again, and we can all touch base on where we're at?
I'd love to.
That'd be awesome.
That'd be a great opportunity. Thank you.
Absolutely.